Yep.
Oh shit.
Hey.
Hey, what's up? Yeah, how's it going? Good, how about you?
I kept it a surprise from the kids. Monica. Nice to meet you.
No. Well, I mean, I did. How are you? How's the drive in?
Anyway, so, what's up, guys? My name's Edward. Don't be weirded out. We're going to talk about weird stuff, all right, for 4 hours. You know what you got into. You're strange people, so don't deny it. Now, a lot of folks, they refer to New Orleans as the most haunted city in all of North America. Few reasons as to why that might be. Practical. Crack cocaine, honestly, but esoteric. It goes back 300 years. It was an undrained swamp. It was nasty. Nobody wanted to move here, so he hires a guy to populate the territory. His name was John Law. Now, John had some questionable tactics. John came up with the bright idea. Look, Duke, here's what I say. We empty the prisons, right? Hear me out. We bring all the prisoners to the port. We tell them that if they marry a hooker, we'll give them lands and provisions. They agree, we marry them right there on the spot. We shackle them together, put them on the ship, sail them to the new world. What do you say? Duke's like, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. First founding mothers and fathers of New Orleans were prisoners and prostitutes. This begins in the year 2005. Old ghosts are scary. New ghosts are scarier. I don't know why. They're just so much more accessible. Now, 2005, rough year for us. We had a guy move to our city. His name was Zach. He'd recently been generally discharged from the military. A two-tour of duty Iraqi war vet. Now, this guy was a bit bitter about his time in the war, but he wants to start his life over. He got a job working at a bar on Frenchman Street called the Spotted Cat. That's where he met a bartender by the name of Addie. They hit it off, they fall in love. Waste no time, baby, let's move in. They got a little place on the edge of the old city, 826 North Rampart Street. They're in their apartment just briefly, it all hits the fan. August 2005, Hurricane Katrina makes landfall. 83% of the city goes underwater. Now, the minority percentage that does not flood, right where we're standing, the French border, above sea level. That's why the French wanted it. Everything else, though, well below sea level. Well below sea level. New Orleans is a bowl. So a lot of folks living in the French Quarter did not evacuate. However, there was a mandatory evacuation. All city officials gone. You're on your own, bro. Levee walls break, floodwaters rise. It's bent. Now, for a guy like Zach, it's familiar because everything went to pieces. It looked like a bomb dropped on this town. Then the military showed up. They take over. It feels like a declaration of martial law. American soldiers arresting American citizens. It was wild. Now, just like that, he's back in the war. Now, for a guy like Zach, yeah, he's triggered, but in which direction? Truth is, he starts to feed off of it. So much so, something snaps in his mind and never goes back. He does not want New Orleans to return to any state of normalcy. He wants this chaos to remain. Didn't get his wish, despite what you see. We do at a glacial pace, seemingly recover. But over the next year, it falls apart. This guy's life comes undone. He turns to drugs, turns to alcohol, heavy depression ensues. His great relationship, not even that could save his life. It all came to a head for him in October of 2006. He and his girlfriend, gone. Days went by. Even in the city that cared for God, we're concerned. What happened? We hope they were on vacation, but no one's answering the phone, no one's answering the door. Finally, though, 10 days after he first went missing, he shows up. He's on Bourbon Street, on a chair, $1,500, booze, cocaine, strippers, keeping it real. Now, he ends the evening of October 17th, 2006 on the rooftop of this building across the street. Omni Royal Hotel. Any guests? Anybody staying there? Now, up there's a bar and a swimming pool. He was getting drunk, celebrating. One drink after another, round after round. It's all on me. What's he celebrating? We don't know. But he paid his tab. Staggers off into the dark. Now, 2 hours went by. 2 guests of the hotel walked to the lookout ledge on this side of the building. Now, they looked out over that parking garage we were standing right in front of. They see something. The faint outline of a human body face down in a pool of his own blood. It was Zach, and life was over. Now, what happened? They hoped it was an accident, but Hotel security checks the tapes. They see him pacing back and forth, pacing back and forth. He's struggling. He's conflicted. Something's wrong. Finally, seemingly out of nowhere, he gets a running start, throws himself right off the side of the building. Boom. Flat. Blood everywhere. They go through his pockets. They find a Ziploc bag. Covered in blood, but the inside's pristine. There were three things: his keys, his identification, and a suicide letter, our first clue. Now the letter says, "I feel as though I owe my life for the lives I've taken. My time in the war." This guy, he never transcended. He was only 28. But they found 28 burn marks in his flesh. One time for every year of my wasted life. Seriously sad stuff, right? With that, he leaves us with a lot of questions. What motivated this? What sort of shame was he contending with? Will we find answers? Interestingly enough, he ensured that we would find his keys and ID, so the authorities immediately go back to his apartment. 826 North Rampart Street. They quickly discover that apartment is sitting on top of an old voodoo temple. They're terrified. We're a bit superstitious about it. I don't know if you've noticed, but they proceed with caution. Up the top of the stairs, they push the door open. Their fears are confirmed. The place is destroyed. Furniture's broken, overturned, drugs, alcohol everywhere, but then they turn on the lights. Once the lights come on, all the walls are covered in writing. Weird messages scrawled out like the inside of an insane asylum. These were messages from exactly the people he left behind. Make no sense of them. Seemed like gibberish. But there was one message, communicated very loud, very clear, and it was the only message we needed to understand. It said, "Look inside the oven." The police went from the living room into the kitchen. They pulled open the oven door, laid out on the oven rack. They found a pair of arms and a pair of legs burnt to a crisp. There's a pot sitting on the stove. They take the lid off. There is a severed head. It's his girlfriend. The flesh boiling right off the skull. The pot next to it contained her severed hands and her feet. Everything left inside of a garbage bag in the refrigerator. He cut her to pieces, choked her, and then he stayed with her for 10 days as she stiffens, before taking her body into the bathroom, puts her in the tub, and saws her into pieces. Brings her body parts into the kitchen and makes an attempt to separate the meat from the bones. No sign of cannibalism, no sign of necrophilia. He was trying to get rid of her, but he quits. Why? Regret? Maybe, but last words of his letter state clearly, "For the things in my life I've done, though I may owe, I feel no remorse." Something was haunting this man. Nobody really bothers to find out. They say, "Oh, yet another veteran, PTSD, drove him over the edge." You combine all this drugs, alcohol, heavy stress, the storm, blah, 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 all that stuff. Yeah, he went nuts, fractured, never recovered mentally. May or may not be true. A lot of guides will tell you, yeah, they see his ghost leaping from the side of the building every year. October 17th, the formation just right around 8 p.m. falls from the side of the structure. I've never seen it. I don't claim to see it, but mediums have taken my tour. They do tell me that they see him, but not up there. They see him down here. This guy does hang out in this area, but it's more of a strange fascination. Does he know he's dead? I'm not exactly sure. But what was really going on with this guy? Was he a sick sociopath? Honestly, Zach didn't care about this city. He just moved here. He wasn't stressed out by the storm. He chose to stay. He was a bohemian of sorts. He was having the time of his life. Katrina didn't push him over the edge. Did the war? I'm not sure. I can't honestly say. You mix in some elements like drugs, alcohol, you might have a ticking time bomb on your hands. But when you live on top of a voodoo temple, that kind of opens the door for something else. We got about 10 minutes inside the bar. It's not a gift shop. You don't have to buy anything. If you just gotta pee, just pee. All right? We're going this way. All right, guys. This is where we're going to discuss vampires. Vampires in New Orleans. Long history, my friends. Now, a lot of people, they're like, vampires, it's legend, it's lore, we don't believe in this. Maybe ghosts, vampires not so much. I get it, I understand. So much fiction surrounding vampires. It's hard to separate what might be fact. We have books like Bram Stoker's Dracula, weird things, right? Distortions of history. But, truth be told, first writings of vampirism go all the way back to the 1500s. Now, Bram Stoker didn't write his book till hundreds of years later, but we've had a history and a belief in vampires since the 1700s. It is said that vampires came to our colony from France, supposedly the mecca for vampires throughout the world. Let's make some space for any pedestrians that are coming through. I appreciate you so much. We just need to make a lane, that's it. You know? for everyone. Make sure people get through. Paris, vampires. They roam the catacombs beneath the grounds. Creepy stuff. But apparently they came over with convicts and hookers. Wouldn't surprise me though, right? So, vampires have been with us for a long time. If you take vampire tours in the city, you'll get a lot of fun stories, honestly. A lot of it, it's just hearsay, it's just legend, myth. But some of these stories are indeed true. This is the story that I include on my tour because this is the one that I know for certain to be true. This happens in the 1920s. 1920s New Orleans. It's a very interesting time. We had a red light district here. Storyville. It's where jazz was born. Now, we also had a guy move to our city by the name of Jacques Saint-Germain. He came to New Orleans by way of Paris, France. He was 45 years of age, very wealthy. Now, he moved in across the street. That big, spooky, 6,000 square foot looking mansion with the blood red door, right? Looks like a vampire's house, doesn't it? Now, he's in there, and this guy, well, he wants to make friends. So he starts to throw parties. A lot of people turn out. Why? Because word spreads quickly that this guy is the last living descendant of the Count of Saint-Germain. Now, who is that joker? Well, the Count of Saint-Germain, historic figure. A lot of people debate on his origins or what his true story is, but at the end of his life, he claimed to be the son of a Transylvanian prince. Oh my word, so cliche. But we don't know if that's true. What we do know is true, beyond the shadow of a doubt, the Count of Saint-Germain was best buddies with Louis XV. And Louis was our first king. Our little guy grew up, made pals. It was said that in Louis's lifetime, the Count was one of the few people he treats as his equal. That's substantial. So if his descendant comes here, even 200 years later, that matters. People want to know this guy. They go to his parties and they discover, well, as fancy as this dude is, he didn't care your race, creed, color, religion, orientation. He knew we were all blood red on the inside. Now this guy was a devoted host. He spared no expense. Lavish spreads of food, catering, party planning, decoration, world-class entertainment. 1920s New Orleans, we're talking about unbelievable jazz musicians. Now this guy had some behaviors that were a bit odd. Never ate with his guests, despite all that lovely food he'd always order up. He was always lost in conversation, making the rounds, drinking from a very particular blend of red wine. Oh yes, we're going there. Now this wine kind of stunk. Looked different, smelled different, and I'm sure it tasted different. And people, they were curious about it. They're like, bro, that's gotta be the good stuff, right? You give us the cheap wine. This is all like Costco box wine. You drink the fancy stuff. Come on, this is stuff I've heard about. Give us a taste of this life. But he refused. He'd say, my friends, you must forgive me. This is a family blend of wine. I only have so many bottles of it left. When they're gone, they're gone. Forgive me. They got over it, right? This dude was hard not to like. He had a certain energy about him. He spoke dozens of languages, as though they were his native tongue. Dozens. Even ancient Sanskrit. The guy's out of his mind. Jacques Saint-Germain. Now, he also played dozens of instruments. All that makes him popular, sure. But popularity comes crashing down. 5 years after he first arrived, one night from the upstairs corner window of this house, a woman breaks through the glass, screaming bloody murder. Shatters into 1,000 pieces, rushes to the balcony edge, throws herself over the side. Man's in the street below, cracks her leg, hits her head. She's out cold, suffering, writhing in agony. Rush to her aid. People take her to Charity Hospital. She comes to. She told the authorities something very strange. She says, I was upstairs in the home of Jacques Saint-Germain when all of a sudden this man moved from the other side of the room toward me in an inhuman speed. He attacked me like an animal. He tore at my throat. Now, the officers, they assumed she was a hooker. This guy loved to run with prostitutes. So, they just figured, it just sounds like a pretty awesome Saturday, right? I mean, like, you got hooked up. But, once they saw her neck, they were like, oh, okay, that's a thing. Now, maybe it came from the fall. Sometimes people were making accusations, women, accusing this guy of doing strange stuff. Why? Because he was a known degenerate. He'd pay him off. Extortion. He was horrible. They come down to the house, they want to speak to the guy. They don't think much of this, but when they arrive, it's a mess. The glass is everywhere. Nobody's cleaned up. They call out his name, no answer. They look in the windows, no movement, no lights on. They pound on the door, nothing. One guy finally forces the door open. They step inside. They look around. They don't find Jacques. More eerily, they don't find much of anything. House is empty. Did he pack up? Did he move all of his stuff? It's a mystery, honestly. But when we do a retrospective on the house, a lot of people believe he never had furniture to begin with. What does this mean? He entertained, right? But all the stuff at his party, down to the utensils, none of it was his. It was all provided. Decorators, party planners, you name it, right? It was one grand facade. Weird. Now, they assume they would still find personal effects in the house, something. They do a full sweep of the property. They go upstairs to where the attack took place. They found a big Persian rug. They pull it back. Underneath, blood. Weird, right? Now, they think, all right, if this woman was attacked, if her story was true, if he was some kind of inhuman monster, how did she escape, right? Now, how does she escape? I mean, it happens 1,000 times a night. Everyone thinks the first time in the world to make fun of a ghost story. His head will explode later, I'm sure. Now, the blood on the floor. They think, okay, how did she get out of here? She tells the authorities that there was a sound, some strange noise that came from the first floor. Whatever it was, it distracted him. Whatever it was, he recognized it. He let her go. He moved through the door of his own bedroom, vanishes into the house. He never goes back upstairs. So she throws herself through a locked window. Like, she's just like, I'm out of here, right? She goes over the side. She's not waiting around to see what this dude's doing. But now they're thinking, okay, maybe somebody killed this guy. Maybe somebody's in the house. Maybe he's still in the house. They do a full sweep. Yet again, they end up in the kitchen. There's no plates. There are no utensils. Nothing. But there was one locked door. The only locked door on the property. Behind it, do they find monsters, animals, Jacques, furniture? No. They found wine. 50 bottles of it. The good stuff. The stuff he was always drinking. The stuff he can never be without. His most prized possession. Left behind. He must have been in a hurry. Now they think, all right, even if he does come back, we need evidence. So we're going to take some of these bottles with us, right? It was a long shift. They get down to the precinct. Well, long night. Let's have a drink, boys. They pop open a bottle. They quickly discovered this ain't right, my friends. It was nasty. They described it as a mixture of 80% blood, 20% absinthe. Every other bottle in the house filled with the same contents. What does this mean? Well, it means there was a dude drinking blood inside the house for 5 years. Now, does that make him a vampire? Yeah, to an extent, right? But he's checking some boxes for sure. I mean, he could just be a complete lunatic. Delphine Lalaurie was born in the late 1700s. A very wealthy family, the McCarthy family. She got married at 14 years of age to a guy more than double her age. It was gross. But he didn't live very long. Mysterious death. Wonder what happened. All of a sudden, she's a rich teenager. She gets married again just a few years later. A guy she kind of liked. But 8 years later, guess who's dead? 2 dead husbands, a whole lot of money. She is very wealthy. She's got her kids. She's not lonely. Years go by. Let's give this thing one more try. 39 years of age. She decides to hook up with a young dude. A doctor right out of medical school. His name is Dr. Leo Lalaurie, a spinal corrective surgeon. Now, in the 1830s, that means he's broke. So, he did something very uncommon. He married a woman 16 years older than him. She was a cougar, he was an opportunist. Now, all of a sudden, he's a wealthy doctor.
Yes.
And she decides, well, I'm not doing this again. I want to build my dream home, my happily ever after. They find a plot of land in the French Quarter. It was that one, across the street where those folks are certainly acquiring a curse as we speak. Now, on that plot of land by the year 1830, they built the largest single-family residence inside of the French Quarter. Oh my word, it's breathtaking. Now, this woman, pleased as punch. However, 2 years into her happily ever after, he leaves. He takes off.
What?
Doesn't die. Yeah, files for legal separation. I guess he got what he wanted, money. Or he observed this woman was nuts. Now, this woman, to stave off the loneliness, she begins to entertain. She throws parties inside of this big old house. Her kids, and 51 enslaved people. They were quite rowdy. Now, she lived amongst French high society. Anyone who was anyone wanted to turn out for these affairs. Her cousin was the mayor of the city. Her uncle at one point was the governor of the territory. She was a very influential woman. So they wanted to be seen. And they would also wait. They would literally indulge her whims. She would usually wait a couple hours before she would finally show her face. Why? Because she wanted to make sure everyone was there. Then she would descend the grand stairwell, wearing the finest dresses, hand-sewn, shipped over from Paris, France. Ooh la la. Now, they remarked on her beauty. It was renowned. But over time, as they observed her slaves, they remarked on the fact that this woman was psycho. They saw her enslave people. They all looked beaten, haggard, starved, broken. This was confusing because the French Quarter was still primarily French high society. Even though this was an American city at the time, they did not experience American antebellum mistreatment. The punishments that you would see in depictions in movies like 12 Years a Slave or Roots or stuff like that. None of that happened inside of these big old houses in the French Quarter, right? But their hands are tied. There are no laws protecting enslaved people at the time. So they just kind of choke it down. But there was one guy in the city who had a mind for justice. A judge who lived just down the street. He did not like her. He saw things, heard things, smelled things. He wanted this woman pinned. But there was nothing he could do. But then he gets an opportunity. It was the day that this house caught fire. It was April 10th, 1834. The biggest house in the French Quarter is now in flames. Firemen rush to the property. They axe down the door. They go into the kitchen. They find the source of the fire. They also found a 74-year-old slave woman shackled by her ankle to the stove. Was she being horribly mistreated? Well, yes. Was she being tortured? No, she was the cook. She was tethered to the stove because that was basically like her station. There was a bucket to do her business, a little place to lie down. That was her life. Relatively speaking, she was well treated. We come to understand what she means after she finally speaks. She comes to, she tells the authorities, I set the fire in this house. Wait, what? She says, I would rather die than live another day behind these walls. I've seen so many people just vanish into the house. Dozens of faces. They go to the upstairs attic. From there, they never return. I did not want to become a casualty, so I set the house on fire. Now, they don't understand this. They think she's senile. They think she's nuts. But the judge, by this point, had entered the house. He's a walking search warrant. He says, well, guess where we'll go? The attic. They move upstairs. They go to the attic door. Do they find your run-of-the-mill attic door? Pull-down ladder? No. It was a heavily vaulted, almost dungeon-like door. Think Scooby-Doo. Now, they pop the bolt off the door. From the other side, black smoke billows out. But cutting through that smoke, there was rot. Half the men in the party, they begin dry heaving. They drop to their knees. The rest of the men, they cover their mouths. They move forward. They have their lights. They extend them out. They move to the center of the attic. Once they're in the center, a certain level of visibility presents itself. These men, horrified, they drop to their knees because they began to pray. From where they were standing, from what they described, they had just crossed through the gates of hell. But in their reality, they were in a torture chamber. Indeterminate number, but somewhere between 7 and a dozen people were shackled to the walls. They were manacled, their necks and arms, their legs splayed out, they were torn at their sockets. Now, they were clearly being tortured, they were emaciated, they were drawn out, they looked like they'd been up there for months. But there was movement in the darkness. The assumption, they're still alive. They move closer, they see the movement were actually maggots crawling all over their bodies, their flesh wounds being devoured. They had all been flayed open at their joints. Their skin peeled in 4 different directions. Stomachs were carved open, entrails pulled out, portions of the skull removed, medical devices stirred into the brain, bones broken, spines snapped. Some were forced into cages meant for small animals. This is horrifying stuff. These people had never seen anything like this. They believed that this was a gateway to hell. I don't think they were far off, but something very disturbing eventually was discovered. Underneath those maggots, they actually found out that 1/3 of them were still alive. And somehow, miraculously, their infections were being cleansed by the maggots.